Hello, we are live. It is the Jim Clapper Show. It is Monday, September 7th, 2020, 1 p.m., Labor Day here in the United States. A Labor Day like one we have not had in a very long time, for basically, I'd say, in the memories of anyone, or almost anyone who's alive, where we're still pretty much on quarantine lockdown, where a lot of places around the country are shut down, trying to stop the spread of COVID-19. And yeah, it's already Labor Day. It feels like just yesterday was Memorial Day at the end of May. And 4th of July, and what else did we have? What other holidays have come and gone throughout this pandemic period? I hope that soon we start to coordinate and resolve this. We're coordinating to an extent, but I still wish that we had stronger top-down coordination at the national and global level, so that we would work together to resolve this conflict instead of fighting against each other about what is right and wrong, good, bad, but just trying to be a team together and get through this together. One thing I want to talk about today is considering it's Labor Day, I want to talk about labor. And being a person who used to work in innovation consulting, I like talking about the future of things. So let's talk about the future of labor and the future of jobs and what that means. So two people that have talked about this quite a lot are Yuval Noah Harari, whom I've mentioned before, and Andrew Yang as well, someone who recently ran for president of the United States in the Democratic Party. And they talk about the future of labor. One of the main things they talk about is this concept of automation, and how when automation will come, it will render, as Yuval Noah Harari calls it, almost create a useless class of people, not people who have no worth, or inherent self-worth, but this idea that from a capitalistic perspective may seem not as valuable as as a machine from a production standpoint. So one example to talk about here is the oncoming or future coming automation when it comes to truck driving. So they talk about autonomous vehicles that will be driving these semi-trucks across the United States. And trucking apparently is a very large industry in the U.S. I can't remember what they said, but it was at least a couple 100,000 jobs that are in trucking, if not maybe 1 million jobs. It was something around that size. So quite large when you look at a country of 330 million people. And if they figure out a way to have trucks that can drive themselves, there are tremendous benefits to the owner of the company that's driving the truck to use an autonomous vehicle over a human. So, for example, humans, we get tired. And so there are laws in place saying we can only drive so many hours per day. And then they have to switch. Now, an autonomous vehicle could, in theory, drive 24 hours a day and not have to worry about human lethargy or human exhaustion. There's also the challenge of, if you're driving across the country, humans got to eat. I don't know if the companies pay for this, but the humans have to eat and they have to sleep and all these different things. So that can add up with costs. Also, you have the insurance, the medical insurance for the human, because the human could get sick or hurt. So now you have medical insurance. You may have workman's comp insurance to make sure that the people don't get hurt. And if they get hurt, you have to pay into this to make sure that they don't file lawsuits and such like this. What else could happen? Also, just we as humans have certain capabilities and certain limits. So while we may be better than computers in some aspects currently, perhaps the computers will catch up. I remember watching a show, I don't know if it was 60 Minutes or some other kind of documentary news show on TV that was talking about automation and autonomous semi-trucks, and said that they're able to sense things almost, did he say like half a mile in before it happens, or like they have that sensitivity to be able to sense out half a mile, whereas we humans don't. And they have so many different cameras and sensors on there that they can look at many different things at the same time, which again, we only have two eyes and we can only pay attention to what we can see and hear and smell and touch, and that may not be as sensitive as what some of these new programs and new sensor-laden trucks can detect. What else? There are plenty of reasons why someone who owns a truck could see it being much more efficient and productive and cheap or inexpensive to use a machine or a robot or an algorithm rather than using a human. And what happens when these people lose their jobs? Now, the idea is, okay, well, they lose their jobs and new jobs will come along. But as one of those two people I talked about, Yang or Harari, mentioned, is that, yes, we can adapt, but can we adapt as quickly as we need to the new industries? And can we adapt as far as we might need to? So, for example, maybe we're losing truck driving jobs, but the jobs that pop up are jobs in computer programming. And yes, in theory, someone who is driving a truck can go and learn computer programming. And I'm not saying that they don't have the skills or the ability to do that. But the question is, how long would it take? And how much effort would it take? And how much commitment and discipline and desire would it take to be able to learn that job? And could they do it fast enough? Could they actually make the transition fast enough to where that job is still there? Because if jobs will be appearing and disappearing as new things get automated, then they may not have a job to go to. And this is where I think we face a fundamental challenge when it comes to the future of jobs and the future of labor, is that as a business owner, as a creator, as an inventor, as an innovator, as a person who wants to produce more things in the world and higher quality things, there is a strong drive to make profit in the capitalist model. And humans can be really expensive. Humans can be really expensive. Humans take vacations. Humans get sick. Humans get into fights. Humans miscommunicate. Humans hold grudges. Humans lie and hide things. Humans, there's a lot of inefficiencies that we have as human beings. And when trying to produce something highly efficient, humans can get in the way. Sometimes we can be fantastic. Sometimes that's the best that we have, and we're much better than computers and machines are. But the question is, will it always be that way? Will the computers and machines get better at certain things that we thought were impossible for a machine to do? Now, I spend a lot of my time dealing with language and communication and emotions and things that I thought, okay, these are going to be some of the last frontiers that computers will get to. And then this organization, OpenAI, created something recently called GPT-3. And it's this huge neural network about communication. And basically, I think they went out to many different sources on the internet and crunched all this different language to try to come up with an algorithm that will create language. And they'll be able to communicate in real time with people, texting or through text mostly. And you can do things with it, such as like ask Albert Einstein to write a poem about soccer, and it will write a poem in its attempt at Albert Einstein's style or Dr. Seuss's style about soccer. Or you could ask questions of Steve Jobs and have him respond about entrepreneurship. Or you can, and now it's not perfect by any means, but it is surprisingly much more accurate than I had thought it would be. And it scares me in a way, because I thought, oh, I will be immune, okay, maybe they'll take trucking jobs, but I'm not doing that manual labor stuff. I'll be fine. I don't know. The one example with GPT-3 was in writing things in terms of the law and trying to interpret law. And it seems to do a pretty darn good job, which means a lot of lawyers won't be writing a lot of contracts and things like this like they used to be. Now, arguably, maybe there's not as much room for as many lawyers, because, you could say that lawyers will take on different roles and stuff, but technology has the ability to cut into fields that we didn't think it could cut into. And if the owners and the producers have this very strong incentive to try to go towards maximum efficiency, and the computers and algorithms and machines and robots give more efficiency than a human does, then we might be, I would say, in trouble, but maybe it's an opportunity to reevaluate what we think a job really means. And this is something that I've had conversations with my parents about, and with some friends and others. But I think often when we say job, we mean two things smashed together. One is to have money or to have resources. Two is to have something to do. So I think most of us need money, or the equivalent of money, so that we can have rent, pay for rent, pay for food, get shelter, get leisure, all these different things. So we need the money, but then we also need something to do, because without something to do, we go crazy. So like having a purpose for living, something to get up, a movement that I should do throughout the day, a structure, a goal, a motivation, things like that. Something for my body and my mind and my being to do. I think for very long, those two have been together. To have a job means to have the money paying for the thing that I do. But I'm wondering if in the future they could be separate things. So to have the money and then have something to do. So this is maybe where some of these concepts of universal basic income come into play. I don't necessarily like the name universal basic income, because I think income, at least now, can be tied towards, it's so deeply embedded in the concept of like money for doing something. But perhaps we could reevaluate, or we could redefine what income means, or look at it again, because there are a lot of people who make income, who make money, and they're not doing much. They own something, or they rent something out. A lot of it comes down to owning something instead of doing something, if that makes sense. So somebody who owns property in Texas and they find oil underneath it makes a lot of money, and they're not technically doing much. There's not a lot of physical labor. There's maybe not a lot of mental labor. There's not a lot of emotional labor. There's not a lot of action or of movement that requires the earning of this money. And I wonder if we would start to explore how something like that, universal basic income, or as Andrew Yang was calling it, the freedom dividend, this idea of getting returns on something we own. So maybe this concept of we own the government, or we as the people own the American society technically, as citizens. and then have something to do. Now, a lot of the claims for universal basic income right now are to make it very low so that people just get the bare necessities covered. And I think that's fine. The idea being that if people want to make more money, they are free to make more money. There's still jobs. There's still other skills and stuff that they could learn. They could own other things. There's other ways to make income. There's other things to do. But for those who get paid enough for what they want, they still want to do something. And so this is where we could start seeing the rise of things that people have done for many years, but haven't been considered directly productive to society. I believe that they're highly valuable, but the capitalist model hasn't valued them. So it's like, if I have the money, then, the top example is, I could be an artist. But it's not about just being an artist. So an artist can help create new things in society, whether that's culture or community. But it could be a scientist. It could be exploring something that you've wanted to explore for a very long time as a scientist. And that can lead to new contributions in society. It could lead to higher productivity. It could lead to new machines. It could lead to new ways of seeing the world. It could lead to new ways of growing food. It could lead to new ways of curing pandemics. So having the freedom to explore that could lead to many things. But it's also, we're not talking just about artistry or science, but it could be caretaking, taking care of kids at the home and really spending time with children, or spending time with the elderly, or spending time with neighbors, and building community and human belonging. And right now, unfortunately, a lot of that work of building community and human belonging doesn't get paid well, because there's not a very strong connection. Maybe there's not a strong connection to it being a job. Who is going to pay for it? And I wonder if I think the problem sometimes is that capitalism can pay for things that directly lead to more productivity or efficiency in society, but not the things that indirectly lead to it, or the things that are 1, 2, or 3 layers below it. There's a book that I read the other day. I read most of it, and then my friend said he really wanted it, so I gave it to him before I finished. I'm a bit frustrated I haven't picked it up again, but it's called Obliquity. And it's this concept of, if we want to go towards a goal, if we go straight at the goal, we often miss it. One way to achieve it is to kind of come at it from an oblique perspective, coming at it from a different angle, and then we can achieve it. Some of the examples he uses in the book relate directly to capitalism. One of them is how some very large companies will, I think Boeing was an example. Boeing at one point focused on being the best producer of airplanes around the world. They were so focused on airplane engineering and production. And when they were so focused on engineering and production of airplanes, they made a lot of money. And at some point, a new CEO came in, and they shifted their focus to being to be highly profitable. And as they were focused on being highly profitable and making money, the quality of the airplanes went down, and they stopped making so much money. And so I think one of the morals of that story was to get a lot of money, focus on something else. Or to hit this goal, don't try to get it directly, because if you focus on it directly, you're going to lose the thing that's actually going to help you to contribute to the goal. And I think when we talk about what we have historically called jobs or the labor market in the US, it's often the things that are directly correlated and directly tied to capitalism, directly tied to production, that receive the most worth, aka get paid the most money. Whereas the ones that are more indirectly or obliquely tied to capitalism, production, efficiency don't. Yet maybe just as important, if not more important, to what's happening in society. And so this goes into maybe a concept I talked about before with regards to trust, and how an economist thinks the difference between a place like Somalia and the US is just how much people trust each other in terms of the economy. When people trust each other, there's a lot less friction, transactions move easier, things are much more efficient. And when people aren't able to make the money doing some of the work and doing some of the labor that will build this trust in society, then trust may start to dwindle because people are focused on getting the money, or the people who work on this stuff may struggle to continue to do it because they're not getting the money. And currently, in the US, I believe there are many of us who feel very lonely at times. I feel very disconnected from our neighbors, our friends, our family, our strangers in the street, our politicians, our police officers, our medical professionals, our scientists, our professors, our teachers, our nurses, our doctors, our postal carriers, all these different people in society that we feel really, either disconnected or distant, or we distrust them, or we don't think they care about us. And that the fabric of society in many ways is starting to stretch, where we don't feel as close-knit as we used to. And when our jobs when we need to have money and we need something to do, when we want to do the things that are bringing people together and there's no money directly for it, then we're stuck if these two things are integrated, if we can't separate the two. It's very hard. So there are a lot of people who make many sacrifices in terms of finance to do the things to bring people together. But for how long and how sustainable is it? And does it bring us together as much as it could if these people felt the freedom financially to continue to do the work that they do? And I say this in hypothetical, but I'm also talking about myself and how a lot of the work that I want to do to bring people together could be turned into capitalist motivations and charge a lot of money for it. But something about integrating the two at times can feel very uncomfortable for me, and I'm sure for others. I remember reading some research that talks about different types of relationships we have with people, and they've categorized into different, like, exchange relationships or communal relationships. So an exchange relationship is when I'm interacting with someone and I give them something and I expect that they'll return that something of equivalent value in the immediate sense. So I give you this, you have to give me that. It's a very much exchange. And if you don't, then I feel frustrated. Communal is much more the opposite, where I give you something and I don't want you to give me something in return. And if you offer something in return immediately, and especially if you offer something like cash, I get very frustrated and annoyed. In that type of a communal relationship, often we expect the other person to return the favor, but not precisely and not in the immediate present. We want it in the future sometime. And I think it's very hard to have that communal relationship and be very close with people and then expect them to pay us money directly. And so if that is considered my effort, my doing, my labor, and then they don't pay me directly, how do I make money? How do I move through society if them paying me directly for what I have just done for them offends me, because it says that we're in a much more stranger to stranger relationship and less kind of very integrated and close relationship. And so I think there are many people who work in nonprofits and who work in other spaces who work in religious spaces as well, who give services to others and feel uncomfortable receiving money directly for that, and would much rather receive it indirectly in some way. So I just imagine how many services could be unleashed if we gave people money and then let them have freedom to do a lot of the underlying services that support capitalism. Okay, another example. I was listening to a podcast yesterday about open source software. Now, in the podcast, they talked about many things about being open source, and it's not just software. But one thing that they mentioned is that open source software powers a lot of the software that's out there. So if you're not familiar with the concept, open source software is software that typically people have created, and they put the source code out on the internet. So they show everyone what the code is, and they say, here's a small license. If you're free to use the code however you want. And it depends on the license, but some of them say free to use however you want as long as it's not commercial. Some of them say you're free to use it however you want, as long as you copy this license and you make your software open source as well. And a few different variations. But so there's a lot of software out there that is powering the internet and powering many other software applications that companies use. That is open source. And were it to fail, were it to break down, much of the computer infrastructure would stop working. And they talked about how it's a challenge for a lot of people who do this open source creation, but also maintaining, to get paid, because there's not like a direct capitalist mindset when it comes to that. And it's hard to do, somebody would want to continue to do the open source, but not figure out how to make money off of it and then just give up on it. Even if it's a project that helps so many people, without figuring out that money aspect, it can be a challenge. And so I think as we go forward, clinging to this idea that a job means money plus something to do, and that what we need are jobs, could provide us many challenges as we humans try to adapt many different contexts, and we try to compete against computers and algorithms for certain things to do and to get paid for it. Perhaps one of our roles will not be to be the direct producer or the direct labor in society, but become much more of the indirect, the oblique labor that makes society possible. Taking care of each other, entertaining with each other, loving each other, holding the fabric of humanity together, so that we're able to explore, create, maintain, and also build this world together, and not be so tied to this concept of a job gives us money and gives us something to do. I say all this, and part of me is felt quite skeptical, quite a little hopeless on the future as we think about this. But then another part of me thinks, no, maybe I'm just often a few years ahead of what other people are thinking, and that this might be coming faster than I think. With the pandemic, I think there's been much more exploration of just giving out cash to people and see how they use it. There have been nonprofits, one called Give Directly, which is trying to do development in East Africa differently, where people can donate to Give Directly and they will give money directly to people in East Africa who are in poverty and see how they use the money. And there are political candidates who are talking much more about this concept of universal basic income or various concepts related to that, of basically pulling the money and the thing to do into two different directions and pulling them separately. And so in a way, at the moment, I don't think it's going to happen, but I think it's a trend that is going to continue, and we can choose to go down this direction to give each other more freedom to explore and to do things without having it be so directly tied to productivity. But perhaps this sounds like a rambling statement from me on labor, and perhaps this relates more to me than it does to society in general. But I imagine this might resonate with other people. The people who stay at home and take care of the family, the people who have taken care of their neighbors, their relatives, the people who are very curious to explore science, curious to explore art, curious to explore new ways of productivity, new technologies, things like this. And yeah, I mean, maybe this will be helpful for you, if not helpful for me. And yeah, on that note, I hope you all are not sitting here watching behind the screen. I hope you're having a great day on Labor Day 2020. All right, take care, y'all.